Hello and welcome to the Simple UI tutorial. In this lesson, we'll be learning how to set up the basics of a UI, complete with a clickable button, a toggle switch, a slider, a scroll bar, a drop-down menu, and an input field. Playmaker no longer supports self-destruct buttons, nuclear warhead buttons, passenger seat ejector buttons, or belly buttons. The first thing you'll need in any UI is a canvas. You can right-click here in your hierarchy, UI, and create a canvas. Now we can begin filling this canvas with various types of buttons and input fields. Let's start with the simple button. To add a button as a child of our canvas, you can just right-click on the canvas, UI, button. If you press play, you'll see that you can click this button. But right now, our button isn't set up to do anything. It's kind of like a button at a crosswalk. It's totally useless. It's an illusion. A cruel joke played on us by its sadistic creator, conditioning us to press it over and over, tricked into thinking we have any control in our lives. So we can add real functionality by adding an FSM to the button game object. In our first state, we can add a UI text set text action. And we're going to specify the game object as this child text object underneath our button game object. And we'll set the text as press me. This action is targeting the text component on that game object. So if you click on this text object, you can see it has a text component in it. You can see the other settings here like font size and paragraph alignment. The default text in here says button, but when we run the game, our action should change that. So just press play and take a look. Perfect. So back here in our FSM, let's name this state idle. Create a new state and call it clicked. So we want to be able to click our button and send the FSM to this state to do whatever it is the button will do. That's easily done by right-clicking on the state, adding a global transition, UI events, UI click. Press play to make sure that's set up right. So right here, it's an idle, and when I click this, it goes to the clicked state. Perfect. For this example, we can change the text again to show us it's been clicked. So for our clicked state, we could just copy and paste this action from the start state in here and change this to clicked. So now if we press play, it says press me, and now it says clicked. Now let's set up a toggle, or more commonly known as a checkbox. You know, like when you get that little paper that asks, are you harboring an enemy of the state? And you have to check yes or no. So right-click on the canvas, UI, toggle. Throw an FSM on this toggle game object. Now you can see it's overlapping in here. So with this item selected, I'm going to keep my mouse over here in the scene view and hit F. And that centers us on the game object. I'm going to use these Cartesian coordinates over here to find ourselves in front of it. And I'm just going to move this up. A toggle has two states, unchecked and checked. We want to set this up so that when you click an unchecked box, it becomes checked. And when you click a checked box, it becomes unchecked. In other words, we want to go back and forth between two states when it's clicked. So let's create three new states: the bool checking state, the true state, and the false state. For this bool check state, I'll call it bool check, call this checked, and call this unchecked. For this bool check state, we want to add a global transition, UI bool value changed. This is a system event that changes a bool value when the UI element is clicked. In our case, it's when the toggle is clicked. This is a special bool value that in order to get, we need to use the action get event bool data. So let's throw that in this state, get event bool data. We're going to put it in our bool check state. And we'll store that value as a new variable called toggle checked. After that, we'll use a bool test. And we're going to use this to check whether that variable is true or false. So we're going to check our toggle checked variable. And if it's true, we'll create a new event, call it true. We'll create that, create a new event, call it false, and create that. And we'll have these lead out to their respective states. So if the toggle is checked and that's true, then it goes here to checked. If the toggle checked is false, which is another way of saying it's not checked, then it goes to unchecked. For this example, we can make the text change depending on whether or not the box is checked. So on the true state, we can add a UI text set text, and we'll set the game object as this label. This label game object has a UI text component on it and is responsible for the text that says toggle next to our toggle. In this action, we'll type in true. So the text says true if the box is checked. Let's copy and paste this action into the unchecked state, but this time we'll have it say false. So if you press play now, if we click this toggle, it's false when it's unchecked. Click it again, and it's true when it is checked. Now, by default, it's set as true. So what you could do is just throw in this UI text set text in here at its start state. So when you run the game, that actually matches. If you wanted it to be false, you could type in false, and down here in the toggles component, this little is on checkbox, you can uncheck it. So now when you press play, it starts as false. You can click it to be true, unclick to be false again. Okay, now let's make a slider. First, get some little buns. Your average slider bun is about a quarter or at most half the size of your average burger bun. Next, you'll want to cut your patty to match the dimensions of the bun. For this example, I'm cooking a plant-based patty, but the step is the same if you're using a beef patty or even a Krabby Patty. Okay, wait, so right-click on your canvas, and from the UI submenu, you can click on slider. Now with the slider selected, I'm just going to move it down. So we could press play and you'll see that this works and all, but it doesn't do anything. So we can use Playmaker to give it some functionality. With the slider selected, we'll add an FSM, add a second state, and we're going to call it update slider. Right click on the state, add a global transition, UI events, and then UI float value changed. This is just like that last system event we used for the toggle, except here the value it's changing is a float variable. So in here we're going to get a very similar action, a get event float data action. And we'll have it store that data in a new variable, call it slider float. Now, if you press play and keep an eye down here on this little slider float variable, when it goes to the state, actually, you see down here that it goes between 0 and 1. You can see the value changing. For this example, we can set up our slider to show the value it's currently at. So right-click on your slider game object, add a UI text object by going to UI text, and we can call it something like slider value. And I'm going to scooch it over so you can see it. Let's put it right here. And so we can see it a little bit better here in the inspector, I'm going to go over to color and I'm just going to change that to white so we can see that a little bit better. Now back on the slider FSM, we're going to add two actions, a convert float to string and a UI text set text. This convert float to string action is going to let us take that float value and format it into a few digits. We don't want some huge float value. That's just messy. So you can set the float variable to your slider float. And for the string variable, you can create a new one called float display. Let's set our format to something simple like this. Put 0.00. With this setting, our number will always be 3 digits and in this format with that decimal point there. We're going to set it to every frame. Now we want this UI text set text to display that variable we just created. So specify the game object as this slider value game object. And for this text, we'll actually use a variable instead, the float display variable we just made. We're going to set this to every frame. Now when you press play, you can slide the slider and see the value changing. To make a scroll bar, just right-click on your canvas, UI, scroll bar. This uses the same process as the slider, so if you haven't watched that, just go back to this timecode. Right-click on your canvas, UI, dropdown. First, scooch it over somewhere to see it clearly. Let's put it right over here to the side, and then just press play. Let's see what we're working with by default. If you click on the dropdown, you have option A, option B, option C. You'll see it highlights these automatically, and whichever you click, it'll put a check mark next to it and display your option up here. To introduce some functionality, we can add an FSM and add a couple actions into the first state. So let's go ahead and add this FSM. We're going to add in a UI dropdown clear options action and a UI dropdown add options action. This first action will clear the default options, and the second action is what we'll use to add our own options. For this example, we can set this to 3. And you'll see it gives us 3 parameters for 3 new options. Let's call one red, one green, and one blue. Now let's add a new state, and we'll call it select option. Let's add a global transition, UI events, UI int value changed. This drop-down menu is organized using an int value. So the first option is 0, the second option is 1, and the third option is 2. Let's add in some actions to use that int value. First, we'll need a get event int data. Toss that in. And we're going to create a new variable. We'll call this selected index. If you press play, you'll see that selecting these values will show the int for its respective choice. So right now, green being the second option displays a 1, and when I click blue, it should display a 2. And when I click red, it should display 0, and that means we're all good to go. For this example, we can create a little color swatch to show which color we've chosen from the dropdown. Kind of like when you go to buy paint to throw on random people in the streets, and so you have to pick the little color swatches at the home improvement store. So right-click on your dropdown game object, go to UI, image, and we're going to call this color swatch. Next, we can create an array of colors that we can use to color the swatch. So go to the drop-down FSM and go to your variables tab, and we're going to create a new array variable. Call it colors. Now that we've added it, we can change the value of the arrays, the array type, to color. Let's set the size to 3. And we're going to set the colors to the order we set in the options dropdown. So the first one is going to be red. Second one is green. And the third one is going to be blue. Now that we have some colors ready to pick, we can add an array get action to this FSM. This will do exactly what it sounds like it'll do. It will get a value from an array, so the array we want to get a value from is the colors array. The index is the numbered position in the array, so we want to use whatever the number was we just clicked in the dropdown. So we could change this to a variable and use selected index. Then we can store the value in a new variable called selected color. Next, we're going to add a UI graphics set color. We're going to specify the game object as this color swatch. And for the color, we can use a variable, our selected color variable. And before we press play, I'm just going to move our color swatch up here, out of the way. Now when we press play, you can select the color and the color swatch will show that color. To make an input field, right-click on your canvas, go to UI, and input field. I'm going to move this up over here. If you press play, you'll see that out of the box, this input field has some placeholder text that says enter text. And you can click to start typing whatever, like hard work, effort, my life. But that's all. You can't do anything with this. It's all for nothing. I want to point out a couple things here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this input field game object. You can see we have our placeholder text, which has the enter text here. That's where it shows up. And then we have this text game object, which is where the user entered text fills out. It starts off empty, of course. So let's customize this and add some functionality by throwing an FSM onto the input field game object. Let's start by changing this placeholder text. So in the first state, we'll add in a UI text set text action, and we'll select the game object. We're going to set this as the placeholder text. We're going to say enter your name. So if we press play now, you'll see our new placeholder text says enter your name. Now let's set this up so it actually does something with your name once you've entered it. So right click on the input field, go to game object, UI, text. And I'm going to call this result. Now in the input field FSM, we're going to create a new state and call it update text. Then add a global transition, UI events, UI end edit. This transition gets fired off when you hit enter in the input field. What we want to do here is get whatever the player just typed in and do something with that. So first add a get event string data action. We're going to create a new variable called name. And then we're going to add a build string action. Make sure it's after that. And we're going to make sure it's 3 parts. That's by default already set to 3. First is the hello with a space after it. The second element will be the name we just got. And the third element will be an exclamation mark. We're not going to put anything in the separator, and so there's nothing to add at the end. So once all these elements are put together, we need to store them in a new string variable we can call greeting. Okay, we want to display that somewhere after the player hits enter, so throw in a UI text set text. And we're going to specify the game object as the result game object. And for the text, we're going to set this as our greeting variable. And before you press play, let's just move this result game object over to the side. So now when you press play, you can enter your name. And when you hit enter, you get your personalized greeting. In this tutorial, we learned how to create a button you can click, a toggle you can check and uncheck, which also displays its current status, toggles and sliders you can use to control and display a float variable, a drop-down menu that you can use to change the color of a swatch, and an input field you can enter your name in to receive a personalized greeting. Be sure to check out our other videos to learn all the various features of Playmaker. Links to more learning resources are in the description.